Hi, my name is David Ness. I'm with Jenkins Restorations. This is a quick informational video for hurricane response, specifically geared towards anyone who's volunteering to help with some of the restoration work in buildings and houses.
My name is Evan Cook, and I'm going to be covering some of the items such as personal protective equipment and moisture meters that assist in detecting where there is moisture from the flood damage.
So I wanted to hit on a couple of quick pointers before we get into some of the more hands-on stuff. Number one, if you have the option and you have resources, we are one of them, but we would recommend contacting a professional restoration company. That's first and foremost. We are the professionals. Our company, for example, is IICRC certified when it comes to mitigation. We have certifications when it comes to handling Category 3 water, which is what you'll be running into in the event of a hurricane. So best case scenario, get a professional restoration company involved. There's really no substitute for getting someone into the building or to the home that knows what they're doing and have done it before. Number two, if you have to do it yourself, maybe you don't have flood insurance or coverage, and maybe you just don't have access to a restoration company for whatever reason, then we want to really stress safety. That's going to be the most important thing that we're going to talk about today. If we're going to give anyone advice on any of this, we want to make sure that safety is first and foremost in that conversation. So a couple points for safety: structural integrity. Make sure that the home or building that you're working in is safe. Okay, so make sure that it's not falling down or anything is compromised. If necessary, you might need to get a company out to confirm that, whether it's an engineer or an architect. But just making sure that the structural integrity of the home or building is intact. Next is going to be ventilation. Make sure that there's access to breathe, that the building is ventilated. If necessary, open windows when you're working in it. With Category 3 water, there can be vapors and there can be contaminants that get into the air. And if you're going to be wearing a respirator, but even so, you want to make sure that the building you're working in is ventilated in a mitigation situation. And lastly, shock hazards. Obviously, if the building is flooded, you want to look out for any kind of sparking electrical wires or outlets, stuff like that, and make sure that you don't risk electrocuting yourself in a flooded building. The next safety item we're going to talk about, and Evan's going to show you the personal protective equipment that he's wearing right now, and that's going to be PPE. So that's our acronym for personal protective equipment. Really important that this is worn, especially on a hurricane type loss where the building is flooded. It's going to be Category 3 water. And just a quick explanation of what Category 3 water is: that's going to be water that is significantly contaminated. So you're going to want to have a Tyvek suit, a hard hat, boots, gloves, goggles, organic vapor respirator, and Evan's going to elaborate a little bit more on the different types of these items that you can get. And then lastly, and I'll talk about this after Evan talks about personal protective equipment, is going to be the actual work that you do. If you're volunteering for the hurricane response, or you're doing any of the work on your own and you can't get a professional restoration company involved, then we'll talk about the extraction, demolition, antimicrobial treatment, and structural drying that's needed to get that done.
All right, so some of the items here I'm going to be covering, I'm actually wearing, just to give everyone an example of what it looks like to be fully donned in personal protective equipment. Safety is paramount on any active work site. So we should always be wearing personal protective equipment, whether it's a construction site, a restoration site, a building addition, but it's especially important in a environment where floodwater has been introduced because of the potential hazards associated with bacteria, pathogens, and mold. So I'll just go over some of the things I'm wearing. What I have on my head here is a hard hat, and this is important because what it's going to do is protect your head from potential hazards above, like a partially collapsed ceiling. Maybe there's structural issues. There could be a roof truss or someone working above you that doesn't know you're down there, and they could throw something off of a balcony or off of a roof. So it's important that you have head protection on any active work site during a restoration process. Additionally, I'm wearing eye protection. These goggles are breathable, but it's important to note that they don't have a gap underneath the eye. This is important because if you were to be cutting something or tearing something out off of a wall or removing trim, those materials could fragment, and if you don't have full protection around your entire eye, that could allow items to come in and scratch your eye, or cause permanent blindness. Additionally, I'm wearing this Tyvek suit here. This is a Shield Tech 30. It's a micropore suit, so it is breathable, but it's not as breathable as a typical cotton shirt or jeans. It does prevent against dust from getting into the suit. It does cause you to sweat quite a bit. It is rather uncomfortable, but the fact that it's water resistant, not waterproof, and inhibits against dust getting into the suit will protect you from things like mold growth and bacteria that are present in an environment where there's been a flood. Additionally, it's important to note that you should always be wearing steel-toed boots in a work environment to protect against possible items falling on your foot and causing a bone break or a bruise. It also is important so that you can be protected against punctures from nails. Additionally, I'm wearing these work gloves. These are actually not the most recommended pair of gloves. These are good for maybe hauling equipment into a house or moving furniture or picking up bags full of debris. Really, you should be wearing leather palm work gloves like the kind you would find at a garden center at Home Depot or Lowe's, because those are puncture resistant. These are not. So it's very important that you make sure you're wearing something like that if you're going to be removing drywall or something that could potentially puncture your hand. Underneath these work gloves, I have nitrile gloves. These are not breathable. These are waterproof, so they don't allow for water to get into the glove if I'm working in a wet environment. These are not adequate if you're going to be doing demolition because these tear very easily. So you need to be making sure you have an additional leather palm glove layered over top of this when you're performing demolition. Additionally, I have a respirator on. It's not seated on my face right now, but this is a respirator with organic vapor acid gas cartridges. These filter out 99.97% of particulate in the air. They additionally filter out any organic vapors such as mold odors, odors associated with bacteria. So while a respirator like an N95 will filter out particulate, this actually filters out the gas as well, so you don't get stuck with the nasty odors associated with the water damage. Lastly, we have ear protection. It's important to be wearing ear protection if you're going to be operating loud equipment, such as a jackhammer, or if you're in an area where there's a lot of active demolition going on and you have a lot of stuff like pry bars being hit with hammers, that kind of thing. You want to make sure you're protecting your ears, so make sure you have ear protection. I do want to advise that if you are going to be wearing a respirator on a flood project where you're doing water mitigation, it's strongly advised that you get fit tested at a certified medical fit testing center so that you can be sure that what you are wearing is protecting you against what's in the air. Because if you just put a respirator on and you think that that's adequate, you may not be protected. So you want to make sure you're getting fit tested by a certified medical professional.
What I'm going to cover briefly is going to be some of the demolition and actual work that you might be doing on a mitigation loss. Again, if you're trying to handle this on your own in the event that you're forced to, you're going to want to identify what's wet in the house. But typically what we're talking about when we're talking about a flooded house or building in a hurricane type situation, unless there's something wrong with the roof or siding, which is not really what we're focused on right here when we're talking about a flooded house or building, you're going to be talking about flooring and walls that are affected. So like Evan said, it's going to be useful to use a moisture meter to determine what's wet. You'll be surprised, especially if you're not in this industry and you're not a company that does this, that a lot of drywall is wet and you didn't think it was. You might see standing water in that side of the house, but over here the drywall is soaking it up. Drywall loves water, it soaks it right up, and it could be even fully saturated without really being visible to the naked eye. So it's really important to get a moisture meter if you're trying to do this on your own and to identify what's wet and what's not. Because like we've been talking about, in a hurricane situation, the majority of the time you're going to be dealing with Category 3 water losses. The water is significantly contaminated, and I'm repeating that just because it's really important from a safety perspective. It's really important that you wear all of your PPE, your personal protective equipment, and it's really important that you remove all wet materials, especially when it comes to drywall, the insulation that might be behind it if it's an exterior wall, and then the flooring. So real quick, if I'm talking about drywall and I've identified that this wall is wet with my moisture meter, so that's the steps that I've taken, then I might do a 4-foot flood cut. So we call it a flood cut, and we'll measure up to 4 feet, 2 feet, whatever the case may be. If you're doing this on your own and you're not used to this work, I would probably recommend a 4-foot flood cut to be safe. So I've already measured 2 marks here on this wall, right here and right here, to do a 4-foot flood cut. So I took my tape measure, I've identified this wall as wet, and I measured 4 feet up from the wall, or from the floor, sorry. I marked 4 feet, wherever I want to do my cut, I make 2 marks, and then if you can get a chalk line, ideally with someone else, you pull it out here, and just go right there. Pull it taut, and then you're going to mark the chalk line like that. And then really it's as simple as either using a utility knife or a drywall saw. You cut along this line. Again, safety first. If you're not comfortable using a knife to cut drywall, please don't, get someone else to do it. But it's as simple as using a utility knife to go along this line and cut this drywall off and remove it. Okay? When it comes to flooring removal, the same concept applies. It's a little easier to identify what's wet and what's not. You're not necessarily going to use a meter like this on carpet, but carpet is usually, you can usually tell when it's wet by the touch. If you had wet hardwood, then this is a meter, for example, it has a wood setting, scale number 1. And so you could go, this room over here in this flood house that we have is hardwood, so I could use this to determine what's wet and what's not, and that would need to be removed. But real quick, this is what carpet looks like when you remove it. You're going to want to go to a corner of the room, utilizing pliers or a carpet awl if you have it, carpet awl, AWL, to remove the carpet. And then this is what it looks like below. So you're going to have your carpet layer. Typically you're going to have your padding, and then you're going to have the subfloor below. In a Category 3 water loss, what you're looking for is the structure of the home. You want to get to the structure of the home and remove all materials like this that are porous and have the water in them, and that can't be saved because of the Category 3 water. And you're going to get down to the subfloor, and you're going to have tack strip. This tack strip should also be removed as well. So you have subfloor remaining only when you take up the carpet, pad, and tack strip. Before I go over the wall, did you have any comments about that?
I would just say that if you're in an area like this and you've removed your drywall and you've removed your baseboard, your tack strip, your carpet, it's important to maybe get something like a pump sprayer from Home Depot, just a simple chemical sprayer, and utilize that to flush out underneath the sill plates, because those sill plates, the bottom 2x4 on the bottom of a structural wall, there's a small gap and it can be a reservoir for bacterial contaminated water. We just want to make sure we're properly treating that.
So the last thing I wanted to show was going to be what a wall looks like when you remove the drywall. So like I showed you, that you can mark a chalk line on drywall for your flood cut, cut it with a utility knife or with a drywall saw. And then just to kind of give an explanation, if this were an exterior wall, and some interior walls have insulation as well, this is what you're going to be looking at. You're going to have insulation, at least in my area, fiberglass bad insulation like this is most common. You might find blown in insulation, other types of insulation. There might be a plastic vapor barrier over the insulation, but that needs to be removed. The wet drywall needs to be removed, and you want to leave essentially the framing and the structure of the home. And this is what it's going to look like behind the wall when you're done doing your removal. So again, your steps when it comes to a Category 3 water loss, if you're helping with a hurricane, are going to be safety first. Identify that the structure is safe and that you can work in the environment safely. You're going to want to don personal protective equipment like Evan showed you. You're going to want to identify what materials are wet and remove them. And then lastly, you're going to want to use some kind of antimicrobial spray. So we use one called Sporicidin, like Evan talked about. You could have a spray bottle like this or a pump sprayer. When we send this video out, we're going to include some resources for obtaining some of these tools and materials. But using antimicrobial spray to spray the structure and what's left after you're done with the demolition is going to be your final step. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us, Jenkins Restorations, 800-531-8722. Did you have one more thing?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick recap on the PPE. So just remember, hard hat, leather palm gloves, nitrile gloves under those. Minimum Tyvek suit, Shield Tech 30 micropores would be something comparable to what you should be wearing. A minimum N95 half-face respirator, eye protection, full eye protection around the entire perimeter of your eye, and then ear protection.